From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Always start on.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Live in the grill room, the actual grill room. Hey, we're back. Thank you, Keith Turner and the boys, for causing this weather to be out here. I know you did everything you could. Commodore Monroe worked on the weather all week, really good. All of us have, incredibly respected uncles, that were in the military, and they constantly give you these stories, and they try to show parallels between their success in business and what they learned when they were a Marine. My dad was in the Navy, and everything that he learned in the Navy, he put to use in his adult life. Our speaker today is one such person, but he's gone farther. He's written a couple of books, the second of which, Creative Destruction. Bob tells a fascinating story, and as one of the credentials, his son became chairman of the board of our yacht club. So imagine Mark McLaughlin, who would be here, but he's out of town, and he'd be real happy to interview his dad, Bob McLaughlin. So Bob, come on up and tell us what you mean by creative destruction.
It's a real pleasure to be here today. As a member of this club for 42 years, we have so many fond memories of family celebrations, many victory celebrations at that bar, on races that we won. But the most important thing is the camaraderie. The friends that Kathy and I and my family made here over the years. I wrote this book as a teaching document to really teach anybody who aspires to be a leader, try to give them some help along the way. And it's also written as a memoir. It's not written as a biography. I didn't start out with, I was born, I was educated, I was a failure, I didn't think that'd be very exciting. The book starts out that where one of the most serious corporate challenges that I had, and I'll review that with you here this morning. I just want to read something to you. John Collette, a very close friend, wrote an 1,100-word review of the book. Anyone who aspires to have a successful career in business must grapple with the question of what it takes to become a successful leader. What are the skills and the attributes that separate the mediocre and the run-of-mill from those persons that stand out and are recognized by his or her peers and superiors as a leader? How does one acquire these skills? And once acquired, how do they maintain that skill? And anyone who is inclined to ask these questions will benefit greatly from reading McLaughlin's memoir, Creative Destruction, From the Marine Corps to the Boardroom. At age 18, I was a complete failure. I attended Purdue University in my freshman year. I took 5 courses, flunked 4. Was put on probation, and I had to survive the next semester or I was going to be put out. Now, you have to understand that the Korean War was on at that time, and Purdue had a dry campus. I was elected president of our fraternity, and I think it wasn't that I had that outstanding leadership capability, it's just that my fraternity brothers recognized that I didn't go to class and therefore I could manage the house. Our faculty advisor was Lieutenant Colonel Don Beck. He was the commanding officer of the Naval ROTC unit at Purdue. And he was our faculty advisor. It's a dry campus, but he used to come over. All his visits were Saturday night. And we used to throw down quite a few beers together. He signs me up. I agree to do it. And he calls me and he said, I have to take a physical and there's going to be a doctor there. They give you a questionnaire to fill out. You know, you've all taken a physical, and have you ever had, has your family ever had, or, 30 or 40 boxes to click off. And I clicked them off, no, no, no. And then one was, you have a trick knee? And I said, yes, absolutely. So the doctor gets the colonel and myself together, and he said, Colonel, I have to reject your candidate. And Colonel Beck says to him, why is that? He said, well, he has a trick knee. And Beck says, let me see the report. Passes the report over to him. Beck tears it in half, throws it in the wastebasket. And he said, you've never seen McLaughlin. Doctor protests. He said, Colonel, he's going to be a leader of 42 men. If the knee gives out on him, they'll be leaderless. He said, we'll take care of his knee. Dismisses the doctor, and he says, I will have another doctor here next month, and McLaughlin, you do not have a trick knee. Went through that first summer of boot camp, and I'd never been through anything like that in my life. And nobody ever spoke to me that way. Nobody demanded such kind of performance. It activated circuitry in my mind that had been dormant for 18, 20 years. I got so many assignments in the Marine Corps that were ancillary in addition to your normal duties. And I was an executive officer as in a battery. I was given an assignment as a legal counsel to defend Marines. I successfully defended 3 Marines. Now, when I say successful, they didn't lose a stripe, and they didn't have to pay a fine. They lost their pay for the time they spent in the brig. But hey, to not lose a stripe and not have to pay a fine was a major kind of victory. I was then elevated to a court-martial board, and where I served, a lieutenant colonel was in charge of the board and a couple of senior field grade officers. I came out of the Marine Corps, and I felt that I had so many successful experiences that I entered civilian life with an attitude that success would be inevitable. In the book, I outline what the primary attributes are for leadership. A passion. You have to have a passion that you want to lead. And you have to have a passion for training, teaching. You're going to be raising the performance bar continually. And you have to teach your associates how to clear the raised bar. Trust is probably the most important, paramount attribute. Courage, self-confidence, and that you build day by day, success after success. A superior value system, important, and aggressiveness. Now, aggressiveness, I believe that taking action has to be your default state of being. And then finally, resilience. You're going to suffer defeats, you're going to get knocked on your ass, and you've got to be able to come back. And you just have to figure out what went wrong, get back in the arena, and back into the harness. I spent 10 exhilarating years of ever-increasing responsibility with Xerox Corporation. Not only in the copier duplicator business, but then was given an assignment to help turn around a failing division called the Information Systems Division. And from there, I was asked to go to medical diagnostics operations. All right, so I get a call from the executive vice president of the company, Archie McCardle. And he says, I want you to my office at 3 o'clock. I come in there at 3 o'clock, and he said, we, Xerox, are developing a blood analyzer in Pasadena, California. And things have not been going well, and I've had an engineering audit team go out and audit where they are in the development of this technology. So I go home and I read till about 1 in the morning, fall asleep, get up the next morning, read some more, and I said, Archie, the critical path here is the development of 32 chemistries for the measurement of blood. And I said, that's the critical path, and you need somebody out there who is very familiar with chemistry development. I have no expertise in this area. He said, those people have been blowing smoke up my ass for 12 months. And he said, I want somebody out there that I can trust. You're the guy. Meet me in Pasadena on Sunday evening. Trust is so important. Hey, I opened the book with my experience at Fiberboard Corporation here in San Francisco. I can tell you this just as a matter of background. I brought 3 people with me from Xerox, and that was my financial analyst, and he had 2 MBAs who worked for him. This company was in real trouble financially. Now, as far as the economy was concerned, this was 1973. The inflation rate was 9%. It was caused by the excess funding of the Vietnam War. It was also the Arabs had created an oil embargo on the country because we supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War. West Texas Intermediate went from $1.82 a barrel, and it went up in 1974. It increased to $11 a barrel. Well, it's $80 a barrel today. The federal funds rate was at 11%, and everybody is panicking, screaming, hollering that the federal funds rate today is 5%. And I contend with my economic friends that you can make money at 4 or 5% interest, and I just don't understand all this commotion. This is what the balance sheet looked like. The EBITDA to debt ratio was 8. Should never go higher than 4. The debt to equity ratio is 150%. Basically, it should never go higher than 50%. The company had been on an acquisition spree and using debt to finance it. They built up a tremendous amount of debt. And of course, the economy collapses, the housing market collapsed, lumber prices went down. They were in poor operating performance. In the first 7 days, we just had to, ask the chief financial officer, what are you doing? What are we doing differently to conserve cash? Nothing had changed. I closed down all the lumber mills. You don't cut another tree, you don't harvest a tree, you do not buy any timber on the open market, and you don't cut up a tree at all. We're closing down those operations. We had a new plant under construction for calcium silicate in Colorado. Equipment was arriving, and I just said, put the equipment in the plant, secure the plant, put guards on it. We're not going any further. We had a plywood plant here in California that was about to start operations. Startups are very expensive until everybody learns. I said, no way, we don't do it. I went to all the banks and I told them we're not paying any more interest. I'll be back to you when I can pay. Hey, they grumbled. I said, you want us in bankruptcy, or would you rather we try to work this thing out? And I thought we could work it out. So we stopped hemorrhaging cash. We had 45 days. That was our analysts came up and said we have about 45 days of cash. And we just kept extending that, and we kept the company alive. I had to sell a third of the assets of the company to get it back into operating performance by 1976. At the end of the day, in 1976, when we returned the company to profitability, we had some off-balance sheet liabilities. Like the company had been engaged in asbestos manufacturing. The mounting claims for lawsuits for people who died from asbestos. With the crash in the market in 73, 74, our pension fund had been just clobbered. And we had an unfunded pension liability. And we didn't know, there were scenarios as to where we could restore that. But either one of those events could have put us into bankruptcy. So I recommended to the board that we sell the company, or able to negotiate a sale of the company to Louisiana Pacific. We achieved, and the real crown jewel was the timberlands in the Sierras. You're all familiar with North Star. My predecessor had taken 15,000 acres of prime timberland and converted it into a resort, which was bleeding us to death. We had to stop all construction. After leaving Fiberboard, I formed the Sutter Group, and that was a management consulting firm to provide executives to turn around financially troubled companies. Now, I got the assignment because a good friend of mine, a member of the club here, asked me to, if I could go in and turn around a new startup company, which I did while he was looking for a CEO. And his Price Waterhouse audit partner found out what I had done in turning around this enterprise and making money, positive cash flow. And he introduced me to a man by the name of Tom Lumsden, who was in charge of advising financially distressed companies. And he convinced me to come with him and bid on a company that was in bankruptcy by the name of U.S. Leisure. And we won the beauty contest. He was going to be the trustee, and I would run the operations. 4 days before we were to assume this responsibilities, the CEO of the company and the principal shareholder, was a privately held company, committed suicide. So we knew that there was going to be a financial disaster when we got in there. And there was so much fraud. It's amazing. But we turned it around. We had to liquidate 2 out of 4 divisions. Just put them up for auction. The equipment for auction, the land for auction. They couldn't be turned around. But with the remaining businesses, we made them so profitable that we had 2 creditor committees. One credit committee, we got them 108 cents on the dollar, and the other one we were only able to get 80 cents on the dollar for them. And that was the beginning. So Pat Murphy of Murphy, Weir and Butler here in the city, probably one of the top bankruptcy lawyers in the United States, he writes a letter to Prudential Insurance and said, this guy's unusual, he can do some different kind of things. I get a call from Prudential life insurance that says we have foreclosed on the bonds and we get to place the new CEO at Spreckle Sugar. I don't know anything about sugar. Pleasanton, California, puts me in as CEO. Hey, long story short, we turn it around, sold the company to Imperial Sugar for quite a sum of money. And it was 20 years later that MetLife Insurance will call me up and say, didn't you turn around a sugar company in X year? And I said, yes, I did. I sold it to Imperial Sugar. Well, we're the largest bondholder in Imperial Sugar, and they can't pay principal or interest, and they're entering into a prepackaged bankruptcy. And we want you to go in as CEO of Imperial Sugar. That was 20 years later. So that started, really I should tell you how I got there. Working with Prudential at Spreckles, I learned that when they write, insurance companies wrote their bond offerings, they had covenants in there that if you default, we get sometimes 2 seats on the board, and many times they got to replace the CEO and the entire board. They became the principal, they converted to be the principal shareholder of the company. So I learned that MetLife was the bondholder at Fiberboard. They came out whole. And so I called up Bob Schwartz, who was the chief investment officer of MetLife, and he now is the CEO of MetLife. So I meet with him in New York, I tell him what I'm doing, and within 2 weeks, I had an assignment for MetLife. And between the next 25 years, 80% of the work we had was with MetLife, Prudential, Northwestern Mutual. Just turning around company, providing CFOs, myself, other people, and turning around these companies. So I have, each one of these I have outlined in the book. But then at the end of each chapter, or at the end of a very formal event, I create bearings, what I call bearings. And these are advice that I'm giving to the reader. And I say then one of them that I have up here illustrated, that concerning the attribute of trustworthiness, Trust Avenue is a two-way street. If you find yourself in a situation in which your superior is not trustworthy, run, do not walk to the nearest exit. My advice to anyone seeking to be a successful leader is to first join elite organizations. Mentors will find you. Mentors are not someone like you hire as a tutor. Mentors will find you. Never accept the status quo. Always want to improve. Raise the performance bar. Teach the skills to your associates to clear that raised bar. And above all, act. Taking action will be your default state of being. It's going to require courage. That requires self-confidence, but it also requires creative destruction. You have to break down what the philosophy was. You have to sell a lot of businesses. You have to close a lot of businesses. It's very destructive, but at the end, you have an entity that's of much, much greater value. Thank you very much.
What fraternity was that? They picked you as president.
I was an SAE, Sigma Alpha Epsilon.
So they found the rough stone that turned out to be a gem, eh?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
When they first asked you to be their president, what was your first reaction?
Well, I was, leadership, okay, I'll assume the responsibility. I don't know quite, I was just a sophomore, and there were a lot of people with probably superior talents than I had. But as I said, I think that they knew I didn't go to class, and I could manage the kitchen and the stores and the purchases and that sort of thing.
Talk to us about Quantico. First, how big is it? How many people? How many cadets?
Oh, wow. Well, it's a huge military reservation. And we were, that first summers, we were trained out in the boondocks in a camp called Camp Upshur. There's 20-mile marches. With that knee, I was in a lot of pain, but it finally wore out. And I never had another problem with that knee during the time in the Marine Corps.
What was it that caused you to basically get more confidence in yourself?
The pressure, they were trying to break you. I mean, that clearly was their mission, to break you either physically or mentally. And somebody asked me, well, how many people flunked out, if you will. About 10% that first summer, out of 40 people, there were probably 4 empty bunks. You learn to anticipate. You had to observe what was going on. You had to anticipate what the next event or the next command was going to be, and you had to be prepared to move, and it just stimulated thinking.
Can you remember when you were scared when you were at Quantico?
Scared?
Yeah, scared.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of times you were scared. We were out on a 20-mile march once, and it's sort of fear, or how are you going to dodge fear? A 20-mile march, and it was a cardinal rule that you never dropped your rifle. And hey, we got a break. I was leaning against a tree and leaned my M1 against the tree, and another Marine came by and accidentally hit it, and it hit the ground. And that day, the battalion first sergeant was out with us on that march. I don't know, the first time I ever seen a Marine first sergeant. And he came over and he said, "Private, you're on report." And I protested that I didn't drop my rifle, someone knocked my rifle to the ground. And he said, "Let me tell you something about life, Private." He said, "Shit flows downhill, and right now you're standing at the very bottom." Now, that is a sense of fear. I decided that I really didn't want to be there. First, it's a realization, this is where I am. This is where I am in life. I'm at the bottom of the hill, and I want to get up, all right? So I also resolved, I knew what the punishment was. The punishment, if you were on report, you filed out to the company street, they marched you out into the woods about twilight. You took your entrenching tool with you, you dug a slit about this long and about this wide and about this deep, you put your rifle in, you filled it back in. And then you marched back into camp. And you were advised that lights are out in about 10 minutes. And the second thing was that there's rifle inspection at 5:30 tomorrow morning.
Okay, so Quantico and the Marines, people think about how tough it is and how scary it is and what can happen thereafter. Tell me something funny about military service.
The funniest story was the first night. And hey, you gotta, those of you who have not been in the Marine Corps, the DI is a special kind of animal.
A drill instructor, special.
Drill instructor. And so the first evening, you're issued, you've got fatigue, and you're instructed how to get into bed and fall asleep. And you do it by the numbers. And I was in an upper bunk, and by the number 6, 5 you were in between the sheets, and 6 you were sound asleep. Okay, that's sort of how it went. Lights go out, 10 minutes go by, DI comes back into the darkened Quonset hut, says, "Is everybody asleep?" And some guy says, "No, sir." Everybody out of the bunk, fall in at the end of your bunk at attention. DI goes right down the middle of the barracks, and his back is just ramrod straight. He's got his campaign hat on and walking down. And then he pulls back, gets down the center again, goes down. Another victim catches his eye, turns, and this guy is dressed in pajamas. All right, get into your fatigues, into your boots, grab your rifles out on the company street. 20 laps around the parade field at high port. Okay, back in there, lights out again, comes back in again 10 minutes later. Everybody asleep? No, sir. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right. So, hey, you go through the whole thing, 20 laps around the parade field. You come back in, go through the whole thing again. Everybody asleep? Everybody's smart enough now. Everybody has sort of gotten it that, you can't quite, but somebody giggled. Everybody out of here. So, hey, that was a short night. It was a funny night, but, I think we got to bed about 1 in the morning, and you're up for rifle, up at 5, so it was a short night.
Turnaround business is a hairy business. You've got hundreds of millions of bucks at swing multiple times. You did several turnarounds, several successful turnarounds. Lots of people, are frightened. Sometimes these are public companies. Tell me something funny that happened in the turnaround world.
Oh, funny. Well, you might not agree that it's funny, but it sort of comes to mind. I sold that above-ground swimming pool business to Zodiac, a French manufacturer of inflatable boats. And, they had an investment banker who made a mistake of telling us we took a factory in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania that was producing pools only 3 or 4 months out of the year, right? You can't make a lot of money doing that. But they were going to manufacture boats, and this investment banker over dinner one night sprouts out how they're going to use that factory. Well, we modeled the sale price of that factory not only on swimming pools, but Zodiac boats, and we had to construct how you make a boat. All right, and what the profitability. Oh, and we got their public reports. We knew how much money they made at a gross profit margin on those boats. So we had that thing pretty well centered in, and we got big money for that. Okay, so we go in, how you make a deal, and you come in and you enter a conference room on the day of the closing, and there are maybe 30 stacks of papers that have to be signed, and you've got to move from seat to seat and sign them. And when I was all through, then his name was Jean-Marc Gayance. He would come in, Harvard Business School educated. It was the most difficult negotiation that I ever had. He was so in on detail. Okay. So I've signed everything. He used to come in, and he would go through the same chairs and sign all the documents. But he says to me, he pulls me aside or pulls his chair up next to me. He said, Bob. He always called me Bob. And I said, Bob.
Not Bob.
Not Bob, Bob. Oh. So he said, the basket that we've set up for uncollectible accounts receivable. He said, I think it's it's just, it's not adequate. It's not adequate, and we have to increase it. And I thought, wow, hang on to your seat. I really thought I was going to lose my temper. So I didn't speak to him. I spoke to his lawyer, and I said, let's go into your office. So I went into my office, and I said, I want you to tell your client that the negotiation on this deal ended at 4:30 yesterday afternoon. I've signed all the documents. We have a victory lunch scheduled for Jim Belly's on 50th Street. And if your client wants to sign all those documents, he is welcome to the, well, I told him, he said, even if he doesn't want to sign the documents, and he doesn't want the deal, come to the lunch. So I go back into the conference room, I load up my briefcase, I motion to my chief financial officer and general counsel that we're out of here. I say goodbye to Jean-Marc, and I walked and we pressed the elevator button. And before the elevator arrived, the lawyer came out and said, we'll sign and we'll be at the luncheon. Take a little gutsy.
Okay, so Bobby, you have this amazingly fun career. You do all these things in your life. Why on earth would you decide you want to write a book? That's like got to be a tough thing to do. What made you want to do that?
Well, basically, I read Jim Mattis's book on, he was the Marine general who was Trump's Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis. He wrote a book called
Mad Dog Mattis.
Mad Dog Mattis. He prefers the calls. A lot of people use the call sign Mad Dog, but he prefers Chaos. And the title of his book was Call Sign Chaos. And Chaos came from a colonel who reported to him on his staff, and he taught everybody that Colonel has another outstanding suggestion. Chaos. All right, so it's Call Sign Chaos, a memoir on military leadership. I read that and I thought, why don't I write a, and oh, by the way, Mattis was also a failure at 18. And he comes straight forward to that in the book. But Mattis served jail time. I never served jail time. So I thought, hey, here, this guy's written this book. Why don't I write a book on business leadership? And that's how I started it. And I wanted to teach. I love teaching. And this is, I'm leaving something that people can like. By the way, I sent a copy of the book to General Mattis. And I said to him, I've read your book, Call Sign Chaos, and I want you to know that I too was a failure at 18. I didn't mention his jail time. I did mention the fact that he was on the board of directors of Theranos. I did, in my letter, I did say, you may be interested in on page 116 about my experience in developing an automatic blood analyzer. Well, I got the nicest handwritten letter back from him. He said, I want to tell you that I cheated and I fast forwarded to your experience in our Corps. And he went on and said a few words about that. And he never mentioned Theranos. And I'm sure that, I thought maybe in a couple of months I'll get a note from him and it says, I wish I knew you about 5 years ago. But that didn't come in. That didn't come in.
Bob McLaughlin, so fun. So great to see you put your thoughtful energy into a book, Creative Destruction, and it's great to have you again as another guest of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.